Yes, say?
It's never guaranteed that
Maharaj, so then it's never guaranteed that if we go, we may not fall back. There's always a fear that we may also fall
Well,
back.
if you want, you don't have, you can come back. Hare Krishna. The jiva always has independence. Jiva never becomes a robot. But yadgatvana nivartante, one doesn't fall away. That's the general understanding.
Maharaj. So then there is material intelligence. Is there a difference between that and spiritual intelligence?
Yes, of course.
So whatever we acquire...
Material intelligence means intelligence applied in the futile endeavor to enjoy this material world. The spiritual intelligence begins by seeing that endeavors to enjoy this material world are futile, and therefore applying our intelligence to understand what is the nature of the spiritual world. Material intelligence works on the wrong assumption. The sound is not high enough. Oh, I see. Material intelligence works on the assumption that I can work everything out by myself. So it's applied for the wrong purposes and with the wrong attitude. And spiritual intelligence means intelligence applied how to understand the highest reality, and with the understanding that my own intelligence is limited, and that only if my intelligence is guided by the higher intelligence, who is Krishna, can I actually understand anything. So both the motivation and the attitude are quite different in material intelligence and spiritual intelligence. That's why we see that many people who are materially very intelligent are spiritually very foolish. They may be very brilliant materially, but when it comes to they have come up with so many stupid ideas when there is no such thing as spiritual life, or then everything is God is dead, or so many stupid things they come up with. Whereas often it may be that someone who's materially not very accomplished or intelligent is spiritually brilliant, because they understand, I'm the servant of Krishna. Everything here is temporary. This material world is not my real place. I belong to Krishna. So such a person, if he understands that, then he may not be materially very intelligent, but his intelligence is actually far more advanced than someone who's brilliant materially, but doesn't understand this. So real intelligence means to come to the right conclusion. By jugglery, by algebraic jugglery, you can prove that 1 equals 0, but it's wrong. 1 plus 1 equals 2. If you say that, then you're correct. You may be brilliant at algebra, but if you're useless in arithmetic, then you'll get everything wrong. Despite you may be brilliant in calculus, but because you never learn your multiplication tables properly. They still learn multiplication tables at school? They still do. I thought it's all done by fingerwork these days. So, if you learn that 7 times 7 equals 37, then you might be brilliant in mathematical theory, but you'll fail everything because you got it wrong. So that's, in material life, one may be very brilliant materially, but there are some basic mistakes by which they get everything wrong. You're listening to what is going on, or you're chanting japa, or what are you doing? You can't do both. There's a time and a place for everything. If you want to listen here, you can't listen to your japa at the same time. Yeah, more questions.
I'm sorry.
You're becoming spiritually intelligent. No, you shouldn't be sorry. We should be sorry if we don't have questions.
So we are always cultivating spiritual knowledge then?
Are we? We hope so. Mostly people aren't.
So then...
Mostly people are not cultivating spiritual knowledge.
I
If
meant
you're
to ask if it's separate. In the subtle body, that intelligence is the material intelligence now. In the subtle body, the mind intelligence...
When we say subtle body, we mean the mind intelligence and false ego, which are... They're all produced of the false ego of thinking that I am separate from Krishna. Spiritual intelligence is an attribute of the soul, not of the false ego. Mundane intelligence is an attribute of the false ego. Real intelligence or spiritual intelligence is an attribute of the soul.
But that soul, later he might even remember that in my past life I was so-and-so. So then how is that? Now, there are some...
You mean that we have not, as long as we're in this material world, we have knowledge of it?
No, of our past lives, that I remember in this lifetime I was this, I had so-and-so.
Yeah, so?
That intelligence, that memory is retained how, if the subtle body... my question is
that if someone remembers something from a previous life, that's because of Paramatma. Sarvasya chaham hridi sannivishto matasmriti jnanam apohanam cha. The Paramatma is with us. The Paramatma knows everything that we ever did, and He may give us knowledge of a previous life. He may award that to us, although it's not actually it's not particularly meaningful to have knowledge of previous lives. Sometimes people, they go for hypnotic regression, but what does it matter? What is it? In our previous life we were in Maya, and in the present life we're in Maya, so we should get out of Maya by chanting Hare Krishna. It doesn't matter whether you were a king or a pujari or a dog or whatever in your previous life. That we had a previous life, that's there, but what does it matter what we were doing?
But to explain to others that there is life after death, you have to say that, okay, in your previous life, people have these past experiences. So
that may be. Sometimes there are people who have done studies with hypnotic regression and this and that. It's not absolutely required for preaching, but it can be employed. But it's not important to us as individuals what we were doing in our previous life. What are we doing with this life? That's a lot more important.
Is it appropriate to say that at every life, at every new birth, we acquire a separate subtle body? Is it appropriate to say that?
No, that the subtle body goes with us. The gross body dies, but the subtle body goes with us, and that undergoes transformations. The basic impetus is there, but the subtle body, when we're in the body of a goat, gross body, then the false ego is thinking conditions us to think I am a goat. So it's always undergoing transformations. That's how we get different bodies. The gross body we get forms according to the consciousness of our subtle body. Yang vapi swaram bhavam tyajante kalevaram tam tam evaite kauntaya sada tad bhava bhavitaha. According to our thoughts and attitudes at the time of death, it's all stored up and it all becomes manifest at the time of death. And then we get another gross body based on our subtle body. That's why you see in the Western countries it's quite noticeable. Someone has a dog, and their face starts to look like their dog's face because they're attached to their dog, and they're actually the gross body starts to alter according to their subtle body. They're preparing themselves to take birth as a dog or a horse. You see people keep horses and they start to look like a horse. I remember seeing one man, he was selling fried chicken, old man, looked like he would die at any time. He looked just like, his face looked just like a chicken. There's this Kentucky Fried Chicken, Colonel Sanders, his face, it looks like a chicken, and no, that's his business, and that was his business, and because of that, he's when you're eating Kentucky Fried Chicken, you might be eating Colonel Sanders, because he must be taking birth as a chicken again and again. The subtle body forms, that's why, according to one's consciousness, one gets the next body. That's why devotees in Krishna consciousness, even they may not have very physically beautiful bodily features, but they actually look much nicer than non-devotees, because their consciousness is pure. Whereas you see they have all these models, beautiful men and women, but actually devotees see they don't look very nice. They look dirty. Their consciousness is covered by Rajagun and Tamagun, by lust and greed. So they don't look very beautiful. The beauty of film stars and models, that is the beauty of mundane lust and greed. That is not actually beautiful. Devotees appreciate, they see Prabhupada, he looks so beautiful. Who would call an old man beautiful? An old man's body is not beautiful, but Prabhupada looks so beautiful because he's beautiful with pure Krishna consciousness. Yeah, please. You want to give the mic?
In the first chapter, the 14th passage, it is written, "When irreligion is prominent in the family, O Krishna, the women of the family become polluted and form the degradation of womanhood." In the explanation, it's written, "According to Chanakya Pandita, women are generally not very intelligent and therefore not trustworthy." I couldn't quite understand the explanation of it.
Yeah, many people have a problem with that, especially people in women's bodies. The reason for this is that, and this is the Vedic explanation, and apparently it's also borne out by modern psychological studies, is that women tend to be propelled more by emotions. They tend to be, you know this man, what is that, men are from Mars, women from Venus, there's some famous book, so that the intelligence that comes with a woman's body tends to be more propelled by the emotions rather than what in Western understanding would be called rational judgment. So that also has its advantages, because women are much better at looking after children than men are, because they can relate to them, because children are a bag of emotions. Children don't think rationally. So, but because of that, they're considered less intelligent in making rational decisions, because they tend to be ruled by their emotions. And also because of that overly emotional side, they may, especially if they're not trained, as every human being, man or woman, is supposed to be trained in dharma, dharmic culture, then if one is acting on the platform of emotions without higher cultural training, then it's a very bad combination, which is very prominent in the world at the present time in both men and women, that people are not trustworthy because they're simply acting out of what they think is best for my sense gratification. So that's not condemnation. It's not a blanket condemnation. Women have the most important role in society as mothers. That's why women are called the first guru in Vedic culture. Because in the modern age, there's this idea that women should have careers and they should be as good or better than men. But with the body comes a different psychology and a different duty. And by nature's arrangement, women give birth to children, men don't. So, looking after children is an extremely important function, because if children don't receive their mother's love, which is only possible if they have this very sentimental, emotional nature. Because if you're very rational, saying, what do I want to look after this thing? It's passing stool all over me all the time. And it's just screaming all the time. So that rationalness or can be hard-heartedness also, whereas women are by nature very soft-hearted. So that is the function given by nature, ultimately by God, with the women's body. So that is, by following that Stri Dharma, women can be fulfilled in a manner which they can never be if they try to imitate men in the foolishness of men in the modern age of also trying to dominate the world. Rather, the whole society is misguided. Everyone is trying to be a big enjoyer and dominate and be number one. So women are also joining that. But actually the result is that women in the modern age don't make good mothers because they have other priorities. A woman's life is meant for being one of sacrifice, for looking after their children and their families and the elders of society. But in modern life, the elders are neglected, the children are neglected, and the children, being from young age, they don't get any love, so they don't love anyone, and then they grow up as rascals, and the syndrome just perpetuates itself. So that statement, if it's just taken without some explanation, has been and continues to be very shocking. But actually, if we understand the context, it's a fact. And the most intelligent women I know all admit that actually, in this regard, women are less intelligent in matters of judgment because they tend to be ruled by their emotions. Nowadays, of course, men also, is because no one's cultivating sattva gun. Everyone's cultivating rajagun and tamagun. That's why everyone is supposed to approach a guru who's supposed to be in sattva gun, who can give clear indications of how to live our lives in such a way that we may be spiritually benefited. But certainly the traditional Vedic culture, you see, in the modern age there's what's called feminism, which says that women have been exploited by men. They couldn't fulfill themselves, they couldn't have the same opportunities. But the whole idea of having an opportunity in the material world is a foolish idea anyway. To become a big shot in this material world, that's a foolish idea. Rather, one should live his life in such understanding that I'm insignificant. We're all meant to serve Krishna and get out of this material world. And this idea of being ambitious and being very great and being very big, rather traditionally women have been the unsung heroes, or sung by their own children, of being the mothers of families. I have that book there, Glimpses of Traditional Indian Life. It's described that every man in Bangladesh, he keeps in his wallet a picture of his mother. So, Matri Bhakti, because they appreciate so much how the mothers have sacrificed everything for them. So women actually feel fulfilled like that, and they're respected and cared for in their old age. But nowadays, people don't care. Old people are just a burden. They have nothing to offer because they've never cultivated any higher values. Women are the first guru. That means in practical things, they teach you how to behave, and they also teach from the Ram Leela, Krishna Leela. They tell all you things. So in this way, they themselves become very deep spiritually. But in the modern age, everyone, they don't have spiritual life. They just sit in front of the TV. So they have nothing to offer in their old age, and no one wants to look after them either, because the parents didn't care so much for their children, and so the children don't care for much for them, and the whole society becomes horrible. So it's a big topic. Sorry, can you speak in the mic? I couldn't hear you.
Hinduism as such, or Krishna's teaching as such, are associated with India. I wish to know why didn't he manifest in other parts of the world?
Well, he is nowadays.
Yes, but
You see,
why?
different people are born in different situations according to their karma and according to their spiritual development. If you're now in a situation by which you are to enjoy life greatly, then you go to Swarga Loka. If due to your desires and activities you're very musically inclined, then you may be born in Gandharva Loka. So different people are put in different situations to manifest the qualities they have and the desires that they have. So generally people are born in Bharata Varsha who have come to a certain level of spiritual development. And this is a land of spiritual culture where people who are at similar levels of spiritual development can help each other to go up more and more. You may say, why so many people come to Manipal to study medicine? Because the facility is here. So, and then visiting professors come also. And the professors come here because this is a place for teaching medicine. So Bharat Varsha is a place where generally souls who have cultivated piety in previous lives, by the arrangement of Bhagavan through the Bhautik Prakriti, they are put in this place, and Bhagavan himself comes here because this is a place which is particularly favorable for spiritual culture, where the visiting professor doesn't have to come to Manipal. He can go to Mudabidri also. But in Mudabidri, there won't be so much use for him there, for his particular talents. He has to come to the place where people can appreciate. You know Mudabidri? It's a little up the line. So Bhagavan comes traditionally to Bharata Varsha because this is a place where people can appreciate his coming and take advantage of that. That's why. Now he's all over the world by the grace of Srila Prabhupada. Another question.
Maharaj, can I add a comment to this question about why Krishna only comes to India?
Yeah.
Maharaj, my father was saying that when he travels, like for example in Sweden, he saw that the original natives, they used to, what do you call it,
Paganism.
Paganism.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
So he's saying that originally
the Vedic culture was spread all over the world. Yes. There seems to be plenty of evidence of that.
Yes, that's what I was trying to say.
When Christianity bludgeoned its way into power about 1700 years ago in Europe, they attempted to destroy all traces of Vedic culture all over the world. And even nowadays it's common that there are archaeological findings of Ganesh deities, Vishnu deities all over the world, but it's all covered up. They don't like to. There's a kind of unspoken conspiracy all over the world to keep the worldview which is propagated by Western academia, that there were first of all there were apes, and then by genetic mutation they became human beings, and then the pinnacle of human civilization which has developed is in the Western world. There's a kind of unspoken conspiracy to perpetuate this, and that in this, actually according to anthropologists, the level of development of a civilization can be understood to a large degree by its language. So the Sanskrit language is by far the most developed language in the world, and it's ancient. But they like to say that actually the ancient Indian civilization, it was just all cavemen and Ajanta caves, and that was the height of it. And there's also all over the world an unspoken conspiracy, which the Indians are also, the educated Indians are gladly part of, to show that Indian culture is backward. In the Western press, when there's a riot in India, they make a big thing to show, just see how backward. But they have riots in the West also. They have racial violence, and what to speak of riots? They have they have wholesale wars. They invade countries on the pretext of humanitarianism. They invaded Iraq because they want to control the oil, but in the name of humanitarianism and democracy and so many things. So it's all a big hoax, actually. All they teach you, there's so many untruths which they project as truth, and if you say anything against it, they say, oh, you're crazy or you're fanatic, and they try to put this point. If you say that women are less intelligent than men, then immediately you'll get 50 million academics coming down, oh, you just want to exploit women. But actually the Vedic culture was protective of women. They say women should have equal freedom and this and that, and then they complain why women are being raped. Well, what do you expect? If the women are walking around drunk at 11 o'clock at night because they're free to do what they like, then what do you expect? The men are also drunk. Obviously, you have in the cinema pictures, or women in a very lusty pose, and then you encourage them to be like that, and the men to be like that, and then you complain that there's rape. Isn't it ridiculous? You're encouraging it, and the women are dressing in such a way to say, I'm available, come and enjoy. And then they complain, why is there rape? So the Vedic culture didn't give, or actually not only Vedic culture, all cultures, they didn't give so much freedom, because there has to be protection. If women are thrown in the street, and then, they're joking with the young men, and there's going to be, what do you expect? So the Vedic culture protected the chastity of women, which is more important than their freedom. Because if there's no chastity, then children are just born as a result of lust. So maintaining the chastity of women is very important. So there's different values. In modern society, they think everyone should have freedom to do whatever they like. But that's not a very high level of civilization. Rather, we should understand what the purpose of life is and order society in such a way that people act instead of saying people should act in the way they like, rather society should be organized in such a way, in a manner that is beneficial for people. Do what you like, that's dog philosophy, actually. The dog has freedom to do what he likes. So the idea that we should have as much freedom to do as we like, it's not, they think this is wonderful, this is very progressive, but it's not. It means that we are becoming closer to the dogs and the pigs, actually. So in human society, restrictions should be there. But those restrictions are meant for the organization of human society for a higher ideal. And women may be very free in the modern age, but they have more anxiety. They can't depend upon their husband because there's no. That's why they say, I have to get an education, because even after marriage, the husband may leave me, because there's no sense of duty or responsibility. Everyone just does what they like. And so in the marriage, the husband can't be neither husband nor wife. It's not a real commitment. There's no sense of duty. So it's just become, in the name of progress, everyone's just for themselves. So at least previously, previously they had a fixed husband who would make an endeavor to look after them. And even in the roughest of times, husband and wife would stay together. There was no divorce. And women were respected. Nowadays, women are it's just sense objects. How to use them, that's all. For sense enjoyment. So what's better? To be exploited by one man or to be exploited by every man? That's your freedom. But actually the exploitation comes when there's no higher aim of life. When there's no higher aim of life, then whatever system you have, it'll just decay anyway. But the Vedic culture was based on a higher aim of life. The sound system, is it working or what? Yeah.
It's a very paradoxical phenomenon. What one thinks, when it comes to action, it becomes totally different. The immediate corollary for this question is, what decides what? Is it one's fate or is it one's nature?
We choose something and we expect there'll be one result and there's another one, another result. Well, that just goes to prove that we are not the controller. That is the illusion of material life. We think, I am the controller, but we are not the controller.
Then what is the role of our Purushartha, as it says? Our Purushartha, our will. There's something called free will, we accept it. But as an individual, what we
Man
can do?
proposes and God disposes. We can try, but the result is not in our hands. There's all these books nowadays that make yourself a success, but you cannot make yourself a success. If it's there in our destiny, from what we've done in a previous life, we can be a success. Otherwise, anyway, what they call being a success, it's all nonsense anyway. But the role of destiny, that means what's destined for us by our previous activities, that also has a major role. Practically speaking, all the ideas in modern society, they're just... We think that it's for our benefit, but actually we're just being exploited. We don't know what the real goal of life is.
In the 17th chapter, Krishna talks about one's faith and one's nature. My question is, what decides what? Is it one's faith that decides one's nature? Or
it's an ongoing process. Both influence the other. That one acquires a certain faith due to association. Sangat sanjayate kamaha. When we say swabhav, dehinam sa swabhavaja. Trividha bhavati shraddha, dehinam sa swabhavaja. In this, Krishna opens his words in this chapter by saying, there are three basic divisions of faith. Sattviki, Rajasi, Chaiva, Tamasi. Sattvic, Rajasic and Tamasic. So swabhav here doesn't mean Atma Swabhav, as the Madhvas misinterpret. It means the Swabhav that we have acquired due to association with the modes of material nature in previous lives. We have a certain kind of Swabhav that we have in this life. But that can also be changed by association. It's not fixed. That's why we're enjoined to take satsanga. By satsanga we can come to a higher platform. We can rise. The whole subject matter of Bhagavad Gita is to rise above the three modes of material nature. So we can do so by associating with those who are on a higher level. So we have a certain kind of... Here the word Shraddha, that also means one's kind of inclination. One's inclination towards a certain kind of worldview. Or a certain kind of mentality. So faith here means what in English would be called worldview, or the in philosophy, they use the German word, Weltanschauung. It means worldview. So here, the simple term used here is Shraddha. So that means one's outlook on life. But Krishna's whole teaching in Bhagavad Gita is how to go beyond the three modes of material nature. Mangchayo vyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samatityaitan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. The Brahma Bhuta platform, the spiritual platform, is beyond the three modes of material nature. So we have a certain kind of swabhav, we're born with that. And according to the association we have, we tend to, one of sattvic disposition, he tends to associate with others of sattvic disposition. So that becomes reinforced. But we have to go beyond even sattva gun to Shuddha Sattva. That is possible by Bhakti Yoga.
Maharaj, you told about destiny. But what about our karma which we are doing? Like if everything is destined, then...
It's a common, silly question. If everything is destined, how did that destiny come? According to our karma. So that means there's choice. So within destiny there's choice also. Destiny doesn't mean that everything is absolutely fixed. But we have a certain kind of situation within which we have some leeway. We have some room to move also. Just like in Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna speaks of the yoga brashta, one who is performing yoga. By yoga here, Krishna doesn't mean exercise. With this, they're advertising, get free of stress by doing Raja Yoga. That's not what he's talking about. He's talking about spiritual cultivation. So one who does not complete the course, then in his next life, Shuchinam Srimatam Gehe Yoga Brashto Bijayate. He takes birth in the home of wealthy, pious people, or in the home of brahmanas who are dedicated to spiritual cultivation. So in other words, he gets born in a situation which is favorable for cultivating that spiritual consciousness. But he may misuse it also. That's also possible. It's not that you're forced. It's not that if one is born in a pious family that he doesn't have any choice. He will tend to be pious also, but he may misuse it. The example is there are so many examples. The example is there of Ajamil, who was born in a pious family due to his previous pious deeds. Not complete piety, otherwise he wouldn't have been born in this material world. Everyone is born in this material world, Ichha Dvesha Samudhena, Dvandva Mohena Bharata, Sarva Bhutani Sangmoham Sargayanti Parantapa. Due to material desires and envy of Krishna, we are born in this material world. So even if one is born in a very pious family, these faults are still there. And that it may not be very apparent, it may be subtle, as in the case of Ajamil, but by accidental association with persons in the lower modes of nature, he became attracted to that and he fell down. He chose to fall down, and even his parents and other people were telling him, don't do this. But his intelligence became covered by lust. So, we have the choice also. Destiny doesn't mean it's completely fixed. An example is sometimes given that you can get on a plane. So if you're on the plane, say it's going from Mangalore to Delhi, then you're on the plane and that's it. And until it reaches Delhi, there's nothing much you can do. That's fixed. that you're on the plane. But what you do on the plane, you can sleep, you can read the newspaper, you can talk to the person next to you. You have a choice of things to do on the plane. But that you're on the plane, that's fixed. So the broader things may be fixed, but then what you do within that situation, that you have some choice. And according to what you do, then you take your next birth. You fix your next destiny. Yeah.
Maharaj, you said that. Maharaj, is it okay that maybe we should not disregard everything that, okay, you're a big shot, okay, no, that is not important.
Sorry, what's the question?
I'm getting to that. What I'm saying is that why can we not just change the consciousness and yes, become big shots, but utilize that for Krishna?
You can try. But to become a big shot, you really have to concentrate. It's not just by twiddling your thumbs. You have to put your life and soul and energy into it. So the tendency is to be overwhelmed, and you have to associate with people like that also. So to cultivate Krishna consciousness, you require time for sadhana. You require time for hearing and chanting about Krishna. Whereas if you want to be a big shot in this material world, it takes up all your time. You have to really try hard. And also, if you are cultivating Krishna consciousness, you see what's the charm? What's the big thing about becoming a so-called big shot? What's the value? You might be, just as, who said that? Some men are born great, some men become great, and some have greatness thrust upon them. You might apparently by chance become big, but the endeavor to become big in this world takes up all the time and attention of one who's trying to do so. Whereas the human life is meant for understanding Krishna. So where's the time? If you're working, where's the time for chanting Hare Krishna? And if you are chanting Hare Krishna, actually, if you're experiencing Krishna Bhakti Ras, then you don't care very much for being a big shot. And actually, you don't want to associate with all these pseudo people who are big shots, who are just interested in name, fame, position. And yes, well, I was speaking with the Prime Minister the other day, and he's my best friend, by the way. And dropping names, and they have to have the latest, most expensive car, and just in very shallow consciousness. Just like children like to show off my new toy. So they like to show, I've got the best car, I'm better than you. It's childish consciousness. So one who's cultivating Krishna consciousness, he's not interested in these things. So the two things don't go together very well. Trying to become materially big and trying to become spiritually advanced, because to become spiritually advanced means to understand Trinada Pisuni Chena, to cultivate the understanding that I'm very small. If you do become very big in the material world, yes, you could maybe use it for preaching. You could do. But by the endeavor to do so, you'll probably kill whatever Krishna consciousness you have. So better to be satisfied in whatever situation you can easily live in this material world and cultivate Krishna consciousness. Yeah, you're not satisfied. You want to argue the point more. All right. What's your proposal?
My aim would be to serve my Guru Maharaj, and I thought that by doing that, because everyone can renounce and everyone can help in book distribution and like that, be in the temple. But I thought, okay, how can you make it big? How to spread Krishna consciousness in a big way?
The best way is you become Krishna. The best thing you can do to spread Krishna consciousness is to become Krishna conscious.
Yes.
And that you can do best by hearing and chanting about Krishna and serving Krishna. That is the best way to spread Krishna consciousness. First of all, you be Krishna conscious. You cannot spread Krishna consciousness by material consciousness. By cultivating material consciousness, You cannot inspire anyone else to be Krishna conscious. You might inspire them to be a kind of half Krishna conscious, pious materialist, but that's not Krishna consciousness. You might inspire someone to be like you, someone who's practicing some form of Krishna consciousness while their main energy is in how to be a material success. So that way you might make more and more, you might convince more and more materially successful people to be partially Krishna conscious. But that's not Krishna consciousness. There's a question here, how Atma merges into Paramatma. Who asked this question? Well, the Atma is called Vibhinangsha. Different. It's Angsh of Paramatma. And Vibhinangsha, different from. So there's no question of complete merging. But by bhakti bhavana, one can merge into transcendental bliss of serving Bhagavan. But there's no question of becoming Bhagavan or merging and forgetting. One's identity is the servant of Bhagavan. So service means there's different identity. When one fully identifies himself as the servant of Krishna, then he merges into the spiritual nature. But full merging means no service. So this idea of merging is actually, that actually comes from envy of Krishna, that I don't want to serve Krishna. You say not everyone can become fully renounced, but actually, if we are to become Krishna conscious, then that has to be our aim to be. If we say, well, my aim is to be partially Krishna, I cannot become fully Krishna conscious, but then that's not true. The philosophy of Bhagavad Gita is that we are meant to be fully Krishna conscious. So we should aim at being fully Krishna conscious, not being partially Krishna conscious and at the same time cultivating material desires. Now that doesn't mean that everyone has to take sannyas immediately. There has to be some program for allowing people to indulge at some level. But that level is, that's always recommended. Devotees should live simply and not recognize that we have material desires and accommodate them, but don't encourage them. We should rather we should organize our lives in a manner that we can cultivate Krishna bhakti, not cultivate material desires and call it bhakti. That's something else. Do you want to speak in the mic? Well, I prefer you would, because then everyone else can hear it.
Whereas I wasn't saying that we cultivate material.
Well, you're saying you become a big shot in the material world.
No, but I meant
But to do that, you have to cultivate material desires.
But I meant...
I mean, if you're so free of material desires that you can cultivate the desire to be a big shot in the material world, but you're saying, well, we're not free. You're saying we're not free of material desires. We're not fully renounced. That means you have material desires. So the point is too that we should act in such a way that we don't cultivate them more and more. Whereas you're proposing that, yes, I'll become a big shot. That means to cultivate the material desires.
I'm proposing to add Krishna to your life. There's a statement...
Yes, but add Krishna to your life, add Krishna to your life, not add more material desires to your life. Add Krishna to your life doesn't mean that you also add more and more material desires. It means to add Krishna. That means to spend time to center your life around hearing and chanting about Krishna, not to center your life around trying to be a material success and adding a little Krishna consciousness wherever you can. That's not what is meant by adding Krishna to your life. You can do like that. I mean, it's better than being, if you have the idea, I'll be a big shot in this material world and also chant Hare Krishna. You can do that if you like. It's better than saying, I'll be a meat-eating Rakshasa. That's better. But it's a kind of self-deception, because it's, you're more likely to end up just forgetting about Krishna consciousness, as many people who take to Krishna consciousness do, because they're not following the process given by Rupa Goswami, which is given by Krishna in Bhagavad Gita, to put Krishna in the center of our lives. And you can't do that if you're cultivating the desire, I'll be a big shot. Because as I've said, you have to give your time, your energy, your thoughts, everything to that.
Yes, I was under the impression that with a spiritual goal, you can, with a spiritual goal and a spiritual aim, you may have to do these material activities. With a spiritual goal that
Yes, that's true, but you have to see how strong your goal is. How strong is your motivation? It's not that you say, oh, you can do, I'll do everything, I'll act like a complete materialist and have a spiritual goal. But it doesn't work like that. Spiritual, if we actually have a spiritual goal, then the symptom of that is that we will want to maximize our time for hearing and chanting. Practically speaking, if we are in material life, then it takes up most of our time. Especially in the modern age, you have to work and you have to do so. It takes up most of your time, so you don't have much time for hearing and chanting. So instead of thinking that it's all right to spend 14 hours a day working and then there's maybe 1.5 hours left to try and cram in a little sadhana here and there, rather we should try to organize our lives in such a way that we have more time for hearing and chanting. Rather than if we think I'll be a material success, what you're practically saying is that I already have the spiritual goal, and now I'm going to minimize my spiritual life so I can increase my material situation so I can preach. But it's a kind of self-deception, because where is the spiritual life? Spiritual life means more hearing and chanting about Krishna. So it's not that you can just be like any normal materialist and squeeze in a few Hare Krishnas here and there, and when in between, running around here and there, and at the same time you're thinking of how I can make more money and be more prestigious, and that's Krishna consciousness. That is not Krishna consciousness. That is a mundane interpretation of Krishna consciousness. Yeah, give the mic. So, this idea that you should increase materially, but it means that unless you're actually very pure, then the more you'll forget Krishna in the midst of more and more material activities, and by associating with people like that. And if you are more pure, you won't want to do that anyway. You might be in that situation, like we say, by your destiny. There are some people who are like that. It's just like we always used to hear in the Western countries, devotees would say that, well, we're going to form a rock band, and then we'll become famous, and it'll be good for preaching. But actually they just want to play rock music, and they don't become famous, and they just become interested more and more in rock music. They should have stuck to doing kirtan. So this idea that I'll become a material success, and then people will take notice of me, and then they'll become devotees. But I'll use that for preaching. Well, if your actual motive is to preach, it's much better to focus fully on being a pure devotee, and people will notice that, because pure devotees are unusual in this world. Material successes, there are millions of them. So many successes die every day.
What I wanted to ask is, Arjuna was a pure devotee, but first he spent his life gathering all the weapons and becoming a Kshatriya. So we say that was his dharma, to accumulate all the knowledge and everything. Our dharma is not to study and all.
Not in exactly the same way, because that was a dharmic society in which, of course, it was the dharma side was being broken down, and that's why Arjuna had to fight. But basically the culture was there. Vanashramacharavata purushena puraf praman Vishnur aradyate panta nanyat tatto shakaranam. The culture was there that one should perform varnashram duties centered on worship of Vishnu. Vedic society is based on yajna. Everything that everyone does, or everyone's work, becomes consummated in yajna for the satisfaction of Vishnu. That's not there in the modern age. Everything is centered on personal sense enjoyment. So it's not exactly the same. Practically speaking, there is no dharma in the sense that there is in Varnashram society. It's not, when we say, what is your dharma of a student, it doesn't work in the same way that it used to, because society is not organized according to dharmic principles. It's organized according to adharmic principles. The society is organized on the principle that everyone should live for sense gratification.
Just one question. In case material opulence is
Please, just speak in the mic.
In case material opulence is thrust on us because of our destiny, are we supposed to reject it or use it in Krishna?
No, use if you by your destiny you have opulence, use it for Krishna's service. You may reject it or you may use it. It depends. Bharat Maharaj rejected it. But you may use it. If one is not bewildered by it, one may use it. But it's dangerous, because the tendency of the conditioned soul is to try to enjoy it.
But the conscious endeavor has to not be made for material opulence.
No, an endeavor has to be for spiritual opulence. That means for serving Krishna. Otherwise, bhoga ishvarya prasaktanam tayaparita chetasam vyavasayatmaka buddhi samadho na vidhiyate. Persons who are attached to material enjoyment and opulence, their intelligence becomes bewildered, and then they cannot fix their mind in samadhi on Krishna consciousness. So that's why it's very dangerous. You may say, I'm going to concentrate on becoming a material success and a big shot. But the tendency is to become attracted to the goals which everyone else is doing that for, which is material enjoyment and prestige. So you become attached to that, and then you lose Krishna consciousness, which is much more precious. So better protect your Krishna consciousness. Ultimately, it doesn't matter whether you're a big shot or not. It doesn't matter in the slightest bit. At the time of death, we have to remember Krishna. So we should organize our lives in such a way that is most favorable for remembering Krishna at the time of death. Everything should be centered on that. And if you have material desires, well, at least recognize them. At least admit it. And instead of saying, I'm pursuing a career, it's all for preaching. You could use it like that, maybe, but then if your goal is mixed, then your preaching will also be mixed. Unless you're a pure devotee, unless your motivation is pure, you cannot inspire others in pure devotional service. You can inspire them in mixed devotional service. But mixed devotional service is not slightly as valuable as pure devotional service, because it means that we want to, it's contradictory. We want to serve Krishna and at the same time enjoy this material world. All right, seems like the questions died out. So we won't die out. We'll go on living forever in Krishna consciousness. But we may finish this program here. Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Bless. What do you want blessing for?
Progress in spiritual life, and that I may develop life.
Yeah. This is. But the blessing comes by instruction. That's blessing. It's not. Well, I'm doing. On Prabhupada's order, I'm also writing books which are giving instructions. For those who are confused, as most people in the world are these days, about this role of women issue, that book, Glimpses of Traditional Indian Life, because it gives a good idea.